welcome to the Stiles Council, a podcast about the England national football team. I'm Chris Nee, and here with me as always is David Hartrick. Hello, Dave.
Hello, how are you, mate?
I'm alright. I've just watched Judd Trump miss a big pink in the snooks, but otherwise happy.
Team anyone but Higgins.
Yes, quite. So that is dating the podcast to the second, but there you go. We've got loads to cover this week, so we'll get straight into the news, and we'll begin, Dave, with the injury picked up by Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, who went off after 20 minutes of Liverpool's extraordinary Champions League first leg win against Roma. And it looked a bad one. I don't know if you were watching the game live, Dave, but he was, from my non-medical point of view, out of the World Cup in an instant.
I wasn't watching it live because I was watching Robert Milkins beat Neil Robertson at the Crucible.
The Milkman.
But I watched the game afterwards. I watched the highlights afterwards, and yeah, I'm exactly like you, Chris. As soon as he went down, I think the one thing about the sort of modern era, and let's be honest, the sort of amount of diving and feigning of injury that goes on, it does give you a sense of when there's a proper one, when there's a real one. And as soon as he went down, you just thought, oh yeah, that's the summer over. But I don't know where you stand on this, Chris, but he's been playing his best football this season, but I'm sort of sitting here looking at it thinking, yeah, he's been playing well recently. That central midfield role seems to work reasonably well for him. But I wasn't exactly pinning loads of hopes around him for the World Cup. You know, I'm not sitting here thinking, well, we're significantly a worse starting 11 where we were, because we've lost. I just think we've lost a player in what is our weakest area anyway. Would you not say?
Yeah, pretty much. I think he'd be either in the starting lineup for me or on the cusp of it. But he wouldn't be the first name on a team sheet.
No.
So
and
I think he's a loss to the squad. I was hoping he would go.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. But I wouldn't. Listen, I'm not going to say I'm pleased about it at all. As you say, I think it's a big loss to the squad. But what it does do is it forces Southgate, I think, to probably have a look at Loftus-Cheek, probably have a look at Shelvey, and potentially look at a couple of others. So I don't know. I'm not heartbroken, if you know what I mean. I think it's a real shame, and it's obviously, personally, it's a real shame for him, because there's no doubt he would have gone, Chris, and there's no doubt he would have had minutes over there, but it doesn't feel like a Beckham or a Rooney injury somehow.
No, and that's because it's not. I think he doesn't have that level of impact on the squad, despite being a valuable contributor, I think. Shelvey's a good one, actually. We've not mentioned him since we've started the podcast, but he's been quietly winning plaudits with Newcastle. And certainly winning advocates for him to go to the World Cup, because, so the argument goes, there are things he can do that no other English midfielder can do, and I kind of buy that.
Yeah, he's a funny one, Shelby, because there are things he can do that no other English midfielder can do, but there are also things that he can't do that lots and lots of other midfielders can. So he's a slightly funny player for me. What I do like about him is he's very, very good at getting his head up and picking an early ball. And there is an England side we could put out with Jamie Vardy up front, where John Joe Shelvey would be a very handy weapon in terms of loading the gun for Vardy, who needs that early ball, who wants to break the line and needs that early ball. So I certainly think after the season he's had, in a first 11, which I don't think is great, he has been by far a standout player and has really pushed on. So I think you have to have a look at him. But I know, don't get me wrong, I know their roles are slightly different, but I also think Loftus-Cheek is an interesting one, because every time I've seen him play, I am enormously impressed with him. I sort of sit there looking and thinking, well, this is a player that could be doing a job for Chelsea, to be frank. He could well be playing squad games for Chelsea, who are an excellent side. Currently on loan at Palace, he's had 1 or 2 injury problems over the year, but he's coming back and looks fully fit. Scored at the weekend as well. So I think, as one door closes, etc., etc., and we have got a couple of friendlies coming up. We have probably got, I'd say, about 20 places in the squad nailed down. So why not have a little look at a couple of others?
Yeah, Loftus-Cheek, we know, is in Southgate's thinking because he has him already impressed in an England shirt. So I think it presents an opportunity as well as being a bit of a loss to the squad. I would rather Oxlade-Chamberlain was available.
Yeah.
But a disaster it ain't, I'm afraid.
Completely agree.
Should we have a quick giggle at Harry Kane?
Oh, don't. You won't like that, Chris. You won't like it.
No, so we'll keep it quick. A few weeks ago, he and Tottenham appealed to the powers that be, asking that a goal against Stoke City was credited to him. The reason for that was presumably because he's in the race for the Golden Boot. And Dave, we're both members of the Strikers Union.
Right.
We would not have had an issue with Kane claiming this goal if it would have otherwise been an own goal.
No, but look, I have a slightly unique perspective on this. As some of our listeners probably don't know, is one of my roles is that I cover games for Opta in the ground. I'm an in-ground analyst for them. And I mostly do Huddersfield Town games, but I was actually on cover and physically did that game from the ground. And I was staggered that it was given to Kane, because even without the benefit of a replay, and without being in the ground, you could see from the way he celebrated, you could see from his sort of most honest reaction, which was his first reaction, that I think he knows he didn't get anything on that. There was no goal scorer announced in the ground. There was a huge debate between me and the analysts who were watching the game, and I maintain he didn't touch the ball. But if I'm a striker and I'm Harry Kane in that position, and I have been in that position before, I am most definitely 100% claiming it. But what?
Well, off a teammate if you didn't touch it.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, mate. I've been a striker all my life. I've told you before, defenders are scum and must be punished. Right? I've been a striker all my life, and if we lose a game 6-1, but I've scored that one, done my job. You lot need to look at yourselves. Agree with
that. And I'm not above poking a goal in on the line that's going in anyway. I will burst a blood vessel to steal a goal off somebody, but if I didn't touch it and it's a teammate, I'm not having the goal.
Yeah, I can. The thing is, I can understand where Harry Kane's coming from, but I would hope he has gone to Eriksen with half of the goal bonus and said, "Here you go, old chap." Would be my. Yeah. But what is staggering and what we're leading to here, Chris, is the complete and utter sense of humour failure, which is, I mean, if that had been me, Harry Kane is on Twitter and he's reasonably active for a footballer. Obviously, he's got somebody doing it for him, but just go and have a laugh about it. When you see the reaction, just go and have a laugh about it. I mean, like, not every footballer on Twitter can be Peter Crouch, who is outstanding, but not every footballer has to take themselves that seriously. And I will just say, I don't think his club manager helped him out either, Chris.
No, he's slightly hung him out to dry and told a bit of a truth that had some murk to it previously, hasn't he? Like, there was a bit of in the response, we weren't quite sure how much of it was Kane being upset or offended. Until Pochettino semi-confirmed it for us.
Yeah. And
thanks, Gaffer.
Yeah. But not only that, sort of Pochettino, the tweet from the FA, if people didn't see it, was basically a gif of Chris Smalling talking in an interview, the question was something like, who was in your pocket at the weekend after the FA Cup semi-final, and he just says the words Harry Kane. It's a stupid tweet. It shouldn't have come from an official account, but it also shouldn't become an issue. And
no, that's it. That's exactly it. It's a silly thing for the FA to do in the position they're in, but that's pretty much as angry as I can get about it.
Yeah, and Barry Glendenning actually summed it up on the Football Weekly podcast when he said that he couldn't believe that there were actual proper football journalists who were swooning like Victorian ladies about it, and I completely agree with him. You just condemn it and move on. You don't have to talk about the effect on Kane's family and his temperament, and you don't need to ask questions in a press conference and all this. It's just such hyperbolic, crap, to be honest, that I'm not so sure whether the question here is, does Harry Kane take himself too seriously, or does football take itself too seriously?
Yeah, both. Right, let's practice what we preach and move on, shall we? The main topic for this week is, of course, the potential, likely sale of Wembley Stadium, which is draining money, and it's putting the FA in a position whereby the FA Cup semi-finals have been compromised because of cash, and FA Cup final tickets are too expensive as well because of cash. And then we have this massive offer from Shahid Khan, who's the owner of Fulham and the Jacksonville Jaguars, to buy the stadium. And Dave, the signs are that it's not an unwelcome bid.
It's no secret to say that me and Chris do another podcast. That's the Football Fives, and we've just recorded an episode where we've talked at some length about this, and it's quite one thing I don't think I covered on there, Chris, is that it's quite a strange story, isn't it? It's come out the blue. Nobody would have predicted that anybody would A, be interested or have the money to buy Wembley Stadium, or B, that the FA would be so receptive. Because my gut instinct was, again, I don't know about yours, Chris, but my gut instinct was you'd get a load of no, spiritual home of football, not interested, etc., etc. And the fact that they are so interested in selling it, I think is a good thing. I think is a good thing, Chris. Now, we have a slightly different. We both have a different relationship to Wembley, don't we?
Yeah, we do. I'm relatively fond of it. I think the fact that it is seeing the FA lose money at the rate that it's losing money is something that we have to acknowledge. And my fondness for the new Wembley, I don't think necessarily outweighs that. And certainly from an England perspective, the new Wembley for England games and the old Wembley for England games are night and day. So the affection that I have for it is kind of anchored in a past that we're not going to get back to. I think it's a really interesting thing to focus on the England side of this, because in the other show we talked about the whole picture. Here, we have the FA being expected to use money wisely from the sale, theoretically in the long term, for the betterment of the England team via investment in grassroots and upwards. So, although I don't really trust the FA to use that money wisely, I'm very much of a mind to suck it and see on it. And I don't care about having a national stadium as much as I care about grassroots football getting 700, 800 million quid.
Yeah.
I would, I think, if it were the old Wembley, which I know you have, as you would say, Dave, thoughts and feelings about.
Yeah, but it's the iconography rather than the actual place. From somebody who's been to both, the old Wembley, in certain aspects, was an absolute disgrace. It was decrepit and it needed pulling down. But the iconography of the place, the feeling of Wembley Way, the Twin Towers, the quite unique atmosphere was always going to be difficult to replicate, but also the seating were terrible. Half of them were broken. Urine used to regularly wash down some of the steps.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just the start of the problems it had. So the old Wembley needed to go down. The new Wembley is extremely corporate, very soulless, and is used way too often. And this season is quite unique because we've seen it every other week on Match of the Day, thanks to Tottenham, but it gets used far too much for far too many games, including England games. But just before we go back to the football, Chris, I think it's interesting if we just look at this from a business point of view, because there are two sides to the FA getting that money. One is the pressure will be on, as you said, it's not a matter of whether we trust them or not, but the pressure will be on for them to spend it wisely. And there are obviously an awful lot of models around Europe that we could ape pretty quickly with that sort of investment. But secondly, longer term, that new Wembley Stadium, it has become a millstone around the FA's neck financially.
Yeah.
To be released from that, bear in mind, I am positive that the sale of Wembley will come with a caveat that it will still be used for football for 99 years or more for, certain England internationals, etc., etc. I can't see a downside. I really can't see a downside because it's not, we use it too often. It doesn't have the feel and the iconography of the old one. So the sort of against modern football types can't, there's nothing for them to complain about. There's not been enough history there for the latest generation of football fans to really form an affinity with the place. It is extremely corporate, so corporations are subject to takeovers. And business-wise, I just can't see a downside for the FA to do it. So, I jokingly said on the other podcast, get the deal done tomorrow. I haven't really changed my mind, Chris. I still think get the deal done as quickly as possible. And the last thing I wanted to say business-wise, I know I'm talking a lot on this, but the last thing I wanted to say is that there's been a little bit of talk that the FA aren't making enough profit on it. Well,
yes.
Firstly, there will be negotiations ahead, and they will make profit on it. This sort of level of investment comes with an opening offer. There'll be a further 2, 3, possibly even 4 offers. But the second thing is, it's almost impossible to quantify the profit on this place because it has become a millstone for the FA, and occasionally profit is not just financial. It's also the unbelievable strain financially being lifted and taken away and allowing you to do other things. So yeah, they may not make a huge profit on the place in terms of a balance sheet, but however you want to phrase it, maybe morally, they could make a gigantic profit longer term.
Do you think the FA needs to sell Wembley to create a England side capable of winning a World Cup?
I think that argument for England fans is it applies to so many things, doesn't it? If we have a winter break, it could lead to us winning, the international side winning something. If we do this, that and the other, if we got rid of the League Cup and had less football, it could. It's what our football is geared towards ultimately, is having some form of international success. Now, what we've got at the moment, Chris, as we both know, is we've got a couple of generations of players coming through who are a little bit special. Not every single one of them, but there is going to be a starting 11 there in 4 or 5 years' time that is going to be extremely capable. If we can get any level of success with them, success breeds there's a reason why when teams are successful, that little kids are out there trying to emulate them, and longer term it breeds more success. And selling Wembley, if we can give kids facilities, if we can make football more open to all, if we can make amateur levels of football easier in terms of artificial pitches, in terms of other facilities that should be available at subsidised rates through deals with the FA, then, I'm loath to sort of sit here and say anything's going to lead to us winning a World Cup. But I think what it does lead to is us producing better players longer term. And if you produce better players longer term, you have far more chance of, and let's be honest, as England fans, winning anything. Anything would do.
Yeah, and £1 billion is not going to do it any harm.
No.
So I find it difficult to hold Wembley that isn't really Wembley at a higher level of importance than a huge investment into football.
Yeah. Now, to flip this round the other way, Chris, football-wise, the FA sell Wembley tomorrow. What happens England game-wise for you? Dream scenario.
Right. So I'm not going to get what I want from this because there are details that we're not going to bother with on this show. You can go away and read about the supposed terms of the deal. David Conn in particular has been very good on it. The FA will retain Club Wembley revenue is one of those details that we won't go any further on. And that is tied into some form of preference for England to play at Wembley when available. So the NFL season boots them out to an extent. But if you strip it down to its bare essentials, as England and the FA selling Wembley to somebody else, what I want to happen is that Wembley becomes just another stadium, because I don't want England to be tenants in their own home. I find that difficult. So what I would like to happen is that England play matches around the country like they've done before with a deal of success. I don't think it's a case of never playing at Wembley again. But for me, Wembley becomes part of a list that has Old Trafford, Anfield, Wembley, Villa Park, the Emirates, the new Spurs Stadium,
the Amex,
and a few others on it. You what?
The Amex.
Yeah, the Amex. Where's that? And for me, on almost a point of principle, Wembley doesn't have any superiority over those others. I don't think it should be the first choice. I don't think it should be a case of England playing there when it's available. I think it should be rented as and when, like all the other ones will be, because I find it really difficult to stomach the idea that we, as England, openly want to play at Wembley as our first choice and won't get it sometimes. What about you?
I'm a massive advocate of England playing around the country anyway, because I think it creates different atmospheres that help England out in certain situations. I think a national team should tour the country, and people should get the chance to see them rather than being tied to one place. Because as somebody who lives in Huddersfield, if I go and get a very expensive ticket to watch England play, I've also got to get myself to Wembley. Now, if I drive down, it costs a fortune in petrol or diesel. If I get the train down, it costs a fortune in rail travel. Do I stay over, etc., etc.? It's a huge commitment. And I think, this is a very... Let's be honest, Chris, this is a very territorial country. There are regions in this country who are very proud of where they're from. And England going into those regions for games causes different atmospheres. And the England squad talked about when they were touring around the country how much they actually enjoyed it, and does David Beckham score that last-minute goal against Greece if that game is not at an absolutely rabid Old Trafford, who are basically cheering on his every touch absolutely deliriously? Does he have the confidence to go and do that? I don't know. Gerrard scoring at Anfield in an England shirt was a brilliant image. And there's the Turkey game at the Stadium Light. There's more that I think it really helps not being at Wembley. But I am not. I'm like you. I think there are occasions where Wembley is called for, and firstly, I don't think England should ever play a friendly at Wembley, ever, because you don't need to have friendlies there. And secondly, I don't think England need to play against, a San Marino or a Faroe Islands or a Scotland or Wales, Lawsies, at Wembley. I think those games can go round the country, but I'm not against Wembley being held back for a major qualifier against a Holland or an Italy or even somebody like a Sweden or a Poland. That sort of tier of nation. But I'm a bit like you, Chris, having thought about it. I don't want to be tenants. I don't want England to be tenants at Wembley. I think it should just, if we sell it, it should then be treated for the national team as one of a rotation that should take in everywhere from like Portman Road to Stadium Light to St Mary's to. I think there should be a set of criteria, and as long as the grounds pass that criteria, then they're on a list, and if that's a list that is 40 grounds long, all the better for it, in my view.
Yeah, it's a funny thing to say that once Wembley's gone, it's gone with such ease that we are, and a different podcast panel might see it completely in the opposite way to us. But I honestly believe that we won't maximise the opportunity that's here unless it's a pretty much a clean break. And the money from that is properly used.
Wexit means Wexit.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it's, however you look at it, Wembley is an anchor.
Yeah.
With the FA at the moment. It's not helping.
No.
And, to a certain extent, it's not Wembley either. So I feel a bit weird being so comfortable with it, but I think I am.
I mean, I'm even more comfortable than you, Chris. Like I say, I genuinely mean it. Get the deal done tomorrow. Get it done and gone. I can completely understand why Mr. Khan wants it like he does. No problem whatsoever. Let's use his enthusiasm and his very, very deep pockets. Get the best deal we can. Get it done. Get it gone. Let's all move on.
Fair enough. Right, I'm on duty for the player wall this week, and we're going for a big one.
Oh, talk about swooning like Victorian ladies. Wait till you hear this one.
Yeah, here we go. Probably my favourite England player of my lifetime, at least. Certainly my watching England lifetime. I love him in a way that he would not be comfortable with. It is former England captain David Beckham, and I don't really feel the need to go much further in justifying it, but let's have a chat about him anyway. 115 caps, eventually, for England, 17 goals, captain forever, and represented England in major tournaments between 98 and 2006 without fail. So, Dave, I have 1990s Paul Gascoigne in my consciousness. I have a bit less of the first half of 1990 Paul Gascoigne in my consciousness. Where does Beckham stack up against that level of greatness?
Gascoigne, it's a cliche for me to talk about Gascoigne because I love him so much, but Gascoigne was utterly, utterly brilliant. We've never had a talent like him before or since, but where Beckham matches him is just in the outright love of pulling on an England shirt. And with both players, and I don't think you could say this about lots and lots of England internationals of the past 30 years, both players, every time they pulled that shirt on, could not have give any more. Much to their club manager's annoyance, by the way, both of them. And I think there's this sort of trendy thing to talk Beckham down as a footballer and say, well, you know, he was a functional footballer but a larger-than-life personality. No.
Get in the bin.
No, he was absolutely brilliant. I've never seen a better crosser of the ball than Beckham, ever. And it's a cliche to talk about his free kicks and his crossing ability, but I've never seen somebody realise so quickly in their career that they're not necessarily going to have the pace or skill to beat a man, so they need to be able to put a cross in from 40 yards that's just as effective as if they put it in from sort of level with the 6-yard box. And he was just... He like, I always remember Ruud van Nistelrooy, sort of, somebody asked him in one of these interviews on a Premier League programme, I think it was just after he retired, who was the best player he'd ever played with. And he'd played with a litany of, like, unbelievable players. And he just loved playing with Beckham because wherever he was in the penalty box, Beckham could find him wherever he was on the pitch, which I just think, as a striker, you cannot ask for any more than that.
That little pairing was ludicrously good.
Oh, yeah.
And he had similar ones in Madrid as well. Beckham was a man who earned more money than God, who has had a million haircuts, married a Spice Girl, and had this huge business success and this enormous celebrity. But the first thing I think of whenever I think of him, whenever his name comes up, is he was a brilliant footballer, that lad. Because he's never, for me, been anything other than a footballer. And that says a lot about his character.
Yeah.
He was obsessed with being a brilliant footballer. And that extended into England as well. So I've no truck with argument against Beckham being an England great. He was really good, and not just at crossing. He made the most of his ability. I think that's fair. Made the most of his natural ability. He scored some brilliant goals. I think he was an exceptional England captain.
Yes, I would completely agree with that. We've I think possibly the best, and this is a big shout, but I think best England captain since Bobby Moore in terms of the example set, matched by ability on the pitch.
I don't think you find a decent argument otherwise.
No.
I think it's cut and dried, personally. He just made me happy in an England shirt. He did everything you wanted. He scored brilliant goals. He scored big goals. And he gave you 100% every time he played for England. And you just got the sense during the games that he was captaining England that it was the most important thing in the world to win that football match. And if he had to do it on his own, he would do it on his own. And of course, he has one of England's greatest redemption stories as well, because he was dirt for a period in the late 90s.
Yeah, I think, regardless of what you think of them, I think an awful lot of credit has to go to Manchester United and how they handled that period, and how their fans handled that period as well, and the support they gave him, which, I mean, to put it into context, because I think there may be a few people listening to this who are of a generation that don't understand what happened in the summer of 1998 after Beckham got his red card. You know, effigies being hanged from pubs in West Ham, and, you know, like early guys being made for Guy Fawkes night and being burned in the street and stuff. It was absolutely ridiculous. And this was stoked by several newspaper columnists blaming Beckham for England's exit entirely. And to have the mental strength to come back from that, and to have the mental strength to have the season he had in 98-99, for Man United, which, if memory serves, was reasonably successful.
Yeah,
it's incredible. It's incredible, but I don't like the revisionism around Beckham, and I think we both can sit here and say, if you don't think Beckham was a good player, you haven't watched enough David Beckham.
Yeah, we watched his career from start to finish, and you will be talking to me for many, many hours about him before I stumble upon anything like a negative word about him.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of time for him, and I've got a huge amount of time for what he represented as an England player and as an England captain, and we'll probably leave it there for this week's show. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to find us on all the socials. I'm at Chris M. Nee on Twitter. Dave is at David Hartrick. And you can follow Sphinx FTBL on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Cheerio.
See you later.